The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NFL Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in the NFL from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NFL Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NFL.
An update on Jalen Ramsey.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast.
The 53-man roster, the depth chart. What does it look like right now? Well, you have to start with the QB. The quarterback is the most important position in all of professional sports. And the Rams, they have an elite signal caller in Matthew Stafford. And yes, I've seen a lot of these top 100 lists. Yes, I've seen a lot of these top QB lists, and we'll go through those through this week because I have some more thoughts on that. And you don't see Matthew Stafford particularly high, but don't make too much of that because we don't need Matthew Stafford to be an MVP to win a Super Bowl this year. You don't. You need Matthew Stafford to be at his best throughout the season in certain spots, and you want to play good, clean, healthy football, but you want to have him peaking at the right time. And the truth is that even though he might not put up all-pro MVP stats on a game-to-game basis at the current stage of his career, on his best day, when he's right and when they need him to be to win a football game, he still takes a backseat to no one when it comes to just being a pure thrower of the football. So I'm not overly worried about that. And the Rams QB1 is Matthew Stafford. Their QB2 is Jimmy Garoppolo. And then Stetson Bennett is the QB3 right now. I mean, there's only three quarterbacks on the Rams roster, and that's not going to change in the foreseeable future. Stetson Bennett, he should get opportunities to play through every single preseason game. That's going to give Matthew Stafford and Jimmy Garoppolo the opportunity to rest and watch. And I think at the end, what it looks like is Stetson Bennett finds his way on the practice squad. And you probably will see the Rams bring in a fourth QB to camp at some point, of course, because really when it comes to Stafford and Garoppolo, it's just about getting the throws in, getting your work in, and getting in shape, right? Getting your body right, getting your cardio, your stamina right. So you don't need to see a lot from them, but you will need a backup during the preseason, and Stetson Bennett is going to get those opportunities and those reps. So you got to have that guy. I mean, in the event that he goes down with an injury or he just has a really rough go of it, you can't just have him as your only option out there. So I think that's how that plays out right now at the quarterback position. And then the running back spot. Let's talk about some RBs. Right now, if you look at the RB room, you got Kyren Williams, Blake Corum, Jarquez Hunter, Ronnie Rivers, Cody Schrader, and Jordan Waters. So I think right now the storylines to look at when it comes to the running back spot, well, mainly, are they going to get a contract extension done with Kyren Williams? We've talked about that extensively. The last we discussed it, things were trending in the right direction as far as McVay saying that the hope is they get something done at some point with him, hopefully before the season starts. But also, I think Jarquez Hunter, the running back that they picked up in this year's draft, and he had his moments at Auburn. And I think what makes him really, really interesting is the fact that he brings that explosive element. He brings that explosive element with him. And the Rams, they showed a lot of interest in him in getting him when they did. They trade up. They picked him in the fourth round, the 117th pick overall. And I think when you look at what his goals are, short-term, long-term for this team, short-term just has to be getting past Ronnie Rivers on the depth chart. And that took Blake Corum a couple weeks to do when last season started. But I think when you look at where Hunter is and the fact that they like what he brings, he's not someone like Blake Corum who was an insurance policy in the event that Kyren Williams went down with an injury. No, that's not the case for Hunter. Hunter's there to complement Kyren Williams potentially if everything works out. So if everything works out for him, I think that he goes into the tier that makes this squad. I think that the 100% locks are Kyron Williams and Blake Corum, but I think if Jarquez Hunter, everything trends like it has been trending, that he makes this team as well. And then Ronnie Rivers, he's the guy that ultimately goes onto the practice squad. I think you cut ties with Jordan Waters and Cody Schrader, and I think that's how the running back room shakes out right now. And as far as the Jalen Ramsey update, I want to keep this one at the end just because, yeah, it's just a lot of Jalen Ramsey lately. And I just, like I said, my job is to keep you guys as informed about this team as possible. So I don't want you to get surprised about anything. And also, I did talk to someone about Jalen Ramsey that was an insider for the Rams. And basically what I was told is, like, with him right now, they do still like him, but the fact is it's a little complicated as far as how much they're willing to invest in him, as far as taking on that salary. As far as the draft capital goes, not too big of a concern about that because it's going to be a late round pick. But there's just kind of this talk about, is Jalen Ramsey kind of the right guy to bring in right now based on this stage of his career? They kind of have some questions about that. And then also the Sean McVay comments made lately about having a tough time getting a deal done. It's more of a leverage play on the Rams standpoint, just basically making it known that, hey, we're not desperate. And that's kind of how they want to be viewed by the Dolphins. Hey, if we can get him at our price, at that discounted rate, if he falls into our lap, then maybe we'll consider it. But by no means are we calling you guys and making it known that we're desperate for Jalen Ramsey, that we think that he's the absolute end-all, be-all missing puzzle for our 2026 Super Bowl run. That's not how they feel. They still feel like he can be additive and that he would be an upgrade at that position. There is a lot that comes with adding Jalen Ramsey to your team. But as far as the update from Adam Schefter, he said recently, a few days ago on Friday, Jalen Ramsey will get traded. It'll be, I would expect, before the start of training camp. We'll see how it shakes out, where he goes. I think he would like to go to the West Coast, to the Los Angeles Rams, Chargers, something like that. So, nothing too earth-shattering there. The Rams have made it known they're still interested in him. And Jalen Ramsey, he has been in L.A. working out with ex-Ram Eric Whittle, his son. And I think if you're the Rams at this point, if I had to bet on it, I'd probably say it probably won't happen, but there's still somewhat of a chance. I mean, it's not a guarantee or anything like that, but I will say that there's less of a chance now than there was when there was a lot of excitement and buzz that this could happen. It has kind of dwindled a little bit, but sometimes that's the quiet before the storm. And the big issue from what that I'm hearing is that it's just the cost. It's going to be costly to bring him back, and that kind of puts them against the wall a little bit financially, and they don't. And kind of the conversation is he worth it? I mean, if he was all pro Jalen Ramsey at that price, then they would, I think, be a little more interested in it. But you have to realize this is a Rams organization that is great when it comes to scouting potential players as far as information goes. Not every player ends up working out, but they do gather all the information, and they're being honest in the assessment of Jalen Ramsey. They're not looking at him as, oh, if he comes back because he puts on the Rams jersey, he'll be prime Jalen Ramsey. Playing under Sean McVay, he'll be prime Jalen Ramsey. He's going to be that all-pro again. The Rams aren't delusional like that. They don't think that they have this magic pixie dust and they can wave a magic wand and it's that guy. No, I think, what I've learned is that they just have a real honest assessment of what to expect from him at this stage of his career, even if he does come back and the buy-in is really high and he's really, really excited to be here. So that's the thing. I mean, when you're getting quarterbacks and secondary guys when they're north of 30 after signing big deals, it usually doesn't end that great. And I think if you're the Rams, the big question is he happy enough to play on the short term, or would you want to really sign him to an extension? So that'd be kind of my question to you is, even if you are a fan that's steadfast and want to bring him back, would you want to bring him back knowing that to get the best out of him, keep him at his happiest, would probably come with having to get a longer-term deal done with him? And I think for this team's build right now, if you're getting those guys, you got to hope that they're interested in one-year deals. Like you look at Matthew Stafford and Devontae Adams. They know how their contracts are structured where, yeah, if everything works out great, we'll be back. Matthew Stafford, I would say barring injury, is a 90+% chance that he's back for another season after this one. He plays 2 more years as a Ram, but at the very least, you know the way it's structured where you can get out of that. Same thing with Devontae Adams. I think he's going into this year with great intentions, hoping to have a successful season here, but if for whatever reason things don't work out, the Rams can move off of him. And I think that they want that flexibility moving forward because they're in this really unique and interesting position that a lot of franchises just don't have a lot of the times, where you can contend now, but you don't have to send yourself into a 5 to 10 year rebuild if it doesn't work out. And the reason for that is because they've drafted so well, and you have this young core of great players on defense and offense that you can still build around. So I think they're looking for veterans like that can help them this year. We're not necessarily married to long term, right?
FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action while you still have a chance. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. You can place that first $5 bet on some NFL playoff dark horses. The Carolina Panthers sit at plus 240 to reach the postseason. The Bears plus 190, and the new look Raiders plus 320. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today.
Let's talk about the X factors that could make or break the Cincinnati season.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast.
Today we dive into a long, and I mean long, list of X factor players, and we'll try to figure out who the most important X factor players are, perhaps, in an episode that is going to have to cover a lot of names here, James. And obviously, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins make this team go. Those are your superstars. Trey Hendrickson, hopefully in that mix as well by the time we get to training camp. But when we think about X factors, that includes players that we don't talk about as much. It could include Jermaine Burton. There's been a lot of discussion around Jermaine Burton this year, but maybe it's some names that we haven't discussed to quite that level of depth. Obviously, we've talked a lot about variance that could happen on the defensive side of the ball, but when you think X factors and you think Cincinnati Bengals 2025, who comes to top of mind?
And this has I'll just say that. Dax Hill. Dax Hill comes to mind. And part of that has to do with his ceiling and his athletic gifts and what I think he could mean to this defense if they can maximize him and if they can get the most out of him. Because I don't think he needs to be just an outside corner or a nickel corner, or obviously he played safety in the past. Like, I think he can be this defensive weapon for them that they use in a bunch of different ways. Now, primarily corner, but can he recover? Can he be healthy and give them not even a blue chipper, but like a borderline Pro Bowler on defense, not named Trey Hendrickson? That's why I went with Dax. It's like, all right, who's the most likely guy that can be a borderline Pro Bowler on defense? And, you could name a bunch of defensive linemen. I'm sure we'll talk about them. Cam Taylor-Britt, a year ago, people were on the Cam train. I think it's probably Dax. I think he's got the highest upside there. And so when you talk about X factor, what a weapon he would be if not only is he healthy to start the year, but by mid-year, you're like, oh my God, they have a playmaker that can blitz and cover and help guard tight ends. And if you need him to play outside, he can do that. But if you kick him inside to play against the tight end, he's got the size and the speed and the athleticism to do that and to stick with some of the top wide receivers. Like, that to me is the guy when you mix in the upside, the fact that he's coming back from an injury, and the unknown. He's leading the way for me as far as X factors are concerned.
And when we talk about X factors, obviously we're talking about guys that could exceed expectations to a degree so significantly that they change the course of the season. And I think Dax Hill could fit that category. There's a great degree of uncertainty around what he will be coming off the injury and what his role will be. But I want to stick on the Dax Hill topic and dive into it a little bit more deeply. I also want to mention some other players in the secondary that also could, you mentioned Cam Taylor-Britt, fit this criteria of being X factor players. I think DJ Turner probably hasn't been discussed enough this offseason as a player who was also ascending last year, going into now his third year. A player that seems to have figured out some of those limitations around his length and is playing pretty dang good football the last we've seen. DJ Turner also could go into this bucket. I think Cam Taylor-Britt, like you said, also could go into this bucket, which makes that 3 corners. I mean, you could even make an argument for Josh Newton, who people are talking about with captain hype on this defense in his second year. Whoa. You can even throw Josh Newton into that conversation and go 4 corners deep on defense and say, hey, these corners are all X factors. And I think you would be right to say that the corners are all X factors. But let's focus on Dax Hill, because if Dax Hill can approximate Leon Hall's role in Leon Hall's prime in Cincinnati, you're talking about a player that is a perfect fit, I think, for Al Golden's defense. What have you seen when you see various clips come up, or you've been at the practices, obviously, but we're seeing guys like Cam Taylor-Britt end up at safety on some plays, or travel in the slot with tight ends across the field, or whatever it is. We're seeing corners end up in less defined pre-snap anyway positions. You're seeing the kind of disguise the Bengals want to use this year involve players sometimes rotating into different roles. And we'll see what sticks. We'll see what we see in the preseason and early in the regular season when we start to get a real feel for what those differences will be with Al Golden's defense that we think is going to want to run a lot more man. But if the key to disguise in Al Golden's world is that when the offense moves, the role of the defender changes, and you're just going to disguise that way, and you're going to end up with an outside corner rolling to safety frequently, or as part of your core defensive design, then Dax Hill sounds like a great fit for that kind of system, right? And his ability to play man on any kind of offensive weapon, be it tight end, outside receiver, slot receiver, having the movement ability, the size, the technical prowess to deal with those things. And we'll see how that comes along this year, coming off the ACL and in his 4th year. Mm-hmm. That's why he's an X factor, right? But that sounds like a great fit for the direction we think the Bengals defense is going. Yeah, and it's a need. They need it. They desperately need. Like, there's a reason I saw 2 days ago, the Falcons put out, and I was like 4 or 5 days late on the tweet, but it was like year 3 for Jesse Bates loading. And I was like, man, all of our viewers and listeners would hate seeing this, because it's literally like Jesse Bates in a Falcons uniform. And Jesse Bates wasn't just a safety. He helped bring stability to your defense in high level play. And you just need more of that. You need someone to be a high level player. And so the moment you said Leon Hall, I was like, oh my God, if he can be 95% of Leon Hall, like, whoo, baby, like, sign me up, please. And I know Al Golden feels that way. Cornerbacks coach Chuck Burks feels that way, and they believe in Dax. And so I'm really excited to hopefully see the unleashed Dax Hill, where by mid-year, we're not talking about him being an X factor. We're talking about him being a staple of the Bengals defense in 2025 and many, many years after it. And that's a lofty comparison, to be fair. No doubt. Asking Dax Hill to go out there and be Leon Hall right away isn't the fairest thing I've ever done to Dax Hill. And this is a guy that's dealt with some pretty difficult situations throughout his career, as far as position changes, coaching changes, trying to figure out what his role would be, and a clear gap between the front office and the coaching staff on Dax Hill that hopefully is remedied with the changes to the coaching staff. We just talked about that quite a bit in our most recent episode about whether Zach Taylor is in fact on the hot seat. But the way Dax played last year, forcing his way into an outside corner starting role and doing that at a high level, The reason I think about Leon Hall is because in the Bengals defense, he played outside and then would go into the slot when they would go into nickel. And that to me is what I keep coming back to for an ideal outcome for Dax Hill. And he just had a season where he was a great blitzer in a limited sample size. So you give him those opportunities when he can play in the slot, but he also held up on the outside. And Leon Hall was also like elite tackling and in the run game. So if he can get back to that level, Dax is a tackler that he showed in 2023, where, again, limited sample, only 262 snaps last year. We didn't see him tackling at quite that level. He had 5 missed tackles in his four games and 14 snaps last year. Then you're talking about something that can approximate Leon Hall.
Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast.
This next one actually is staying local here. We got Colin from Pittsburgh. Colin, take it away.
Hey, Chris, it's Colin from Pittsburgh. Been listening to the show for a few years now. I really like your stuff. I was just calling to ask if you think that the Steelers will sign Aaron Rodgers to additional years to possibly mentor whatever the quarterback they end up drafting next year. And I also was wondering if you had any way too early predictions and or preferences for who you'd like to see them maybe target in the first round of next year's draft. I know it's hard to predict that because we don't know when they'll be picking, but would love to hear your thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate you calling. Of course, Colin did it 412-223-6644. Leave your name, where you're from. Keep your question under a minute. Okay, so let's address the first part of this question. Aaron Rodgers sticking around for multiple years. Now, here's the thing. There would have to be several boxes to get checked for Aaron Rodgers, I think, to want to do this. Aaron Rodgers seemed like he's a guy who's kind of ready to retire. He's seen the bells and the whistles. There's sometimes when you talk to NFL players, they get to this stage of their career where they're just being like, is it worth it? Because, man, the NFL is a stress on your body, and that is a lot. And especially when you're a guy like him, like, even guys that don't have his success where he's been a 4-time MVP, a Super Bowl champion, a 10-time Pro Bowler. He's seen he's seen everything he needs to see in the NFL, but maybe he wants to do just a little bit more. And that's what he's with the Steelers for. So the thing that would have to keep Aaron Rodgers to want to stay around, and we'll get to the Steelers side of should they want him in a minute here, but let's stick with Aaron Rodgers first. The thing that he needs to see is that he needs to see if this team is serious and ready to go, which means the offensive line needs to take that step up. We've been talking about that they could take that step up this year. That run game, it's present, so he doesn't have to always be the guy carrying the offense. The playmakers emerge. DK Metcalf looks like a true number one. Calvin Austin look like he's coming up. Roman Wilson maybe doing stuff, or maybe they go and get a wide receiver that really works for him. Pat Freiermuth, Darnell Washington, they're a serious threat, but this offense is pretty good, and they're pairing with a defense that keeps them competitive, and they're a team that doesn't just sneak into the playoffs and win and gets bounced in the first round pretty quickly. They're a team that maybe gets to the divisional round, maybe gets to the AFC Championship game. I think that's the thing that Aaron Rodgers would need to see if he wanted to stick around. Because remember, it takes two to tango in this situation. It's not just about if the Steelers want it to happen, because Aaron Rodgers has to want it to happen himself. But what would the Steelers need to see if they'd want it to happen? Well, for one, I think Aaron Rodgers would be welcome to stick around if things work out. Like if, let's say the Steelers get 11 wins this year and they still don't win the division, but they beat the 5 seed in the playoffs, or the 4 seed in the playoffs, because they are the 5 seed. And then they go on the road in the divisional round and they play the Chiefs or the Bills or the Ravens or someone like that, and they pull off a win. Then I think that they might be like, hey, you know what? We can rock out with Aaron for another year as long as he feels healthy and he's not too much damaged goods. And then that way, when you draft your quarterback next year, you have an NFL MVP quarterback kind of still in the locker room, helping them out, keeping ready to go. And there's that situation for you. But that's the other thing you have to kind of, I guess, measure here is if the Steelers draft their quarterback of their future next year, do you want them to sit for a year behind what will be 42 and then eventually a 43-year-old Aaron Rodgers? That depends on how you feel like how ready these guys are. Some of these guys that are in this draft class, and kind of getting to the last part of your question there about who are some of the quarterbacks you're looking at. I've talked about guys that I like a lot. I really like Lenore Sellers out of South Carolina. I really like Garrett Nussmeier out of LSU. Everyone loves Arch Manning out of Texas, of course, for the Manning bloodline. I think Nico Iamaleava could be interesting. Guys like Sam Leavitt could be interesting. There's other guys that like can always pop up, right? Because there's always some guy that you're like, whoa, where did that guy come from? And like their college team's fans knew about him, but the average NFL scout or person that's looking at draft classes might not have been as up on those guys. So the quarterback draft class has to play out first before we even get there, right? But if you're looking at that class, I like guys like Sellers and Nussmeier because I think that either one of those guys could be a guy who doesn't go first overall, maybe is in the conversation to go top 5, but slips outside of it because of other position players being so good, other quarterbacks being in this conversation, and then the Steelers can trade up just outside of the top 5, maybe just inside of the top 10, and go and get the guy that they think is the guy. And then you have the question that if you're getting a guy like that, like Lenore Sellers, are they young? Are they a really young player that needs time to develop more because they're that raw? Or are they a more experienced quarterback? Are they a quarterback who's played enough at the college level to kind of be ready for just the adjustment to get to the pros and just kind of come out swinging? That's another decision that has to happen there. So I think there's just several factors here that play into whether or not you'd want Aaron Rodgers back. But I also think both sides are probably fine with whatever happens. And that's why they signed a 1-year deal in the first place. I bet that Aaron Rodgers is kind of like, I'll choose where I go for the rest of my career or if I want to retire. So to answer the question about Aaron Rodgers, what would it take for him to stick around? It would take him playing really well, the Steelers playing really well, those two things meshing, and him saying, hey, you know what? I want to run this back. And the team saying, you know what? We'd like to run it back with you. But we're also still getting that quarterback next year because that is the ultimate plan. So I do think that's possible. I mean, it's not impossible to see the Steelers, if Aaron Rodgers makes him a better contender this year. And I'm not saying that he definitely will or anything. But it's not impossible to see the Steelers being like, hey, we'll ride back with that, but we're going to give, the quarterback that we think is the future a Patrick Mahomes season. Because remember, Patrick Mahomes didn't come out the gate starting. Alex Smith started over him for a time. And so for a year. And then eventually he took over and then he became Patrick Mahomes. And everyone was like, oh, my goodness, this guy is the truth. And so that's a possibility. But I do think that the Steelers are keeping their options open. That's why they didn't sign him to a 2-year or more deal as is. I think that's something that when you look at how they've handled things, they're keeping their options open. They're staying available to be able to make moves, be shifty. And I think that's something that's good that Omar Khan's doing because this is the quarterback position is always tough to nail down. And you may have Aaron Rodgers right now, but you could have your future franchise guy next year if you get the draft right. So I do think that when it comes to this situation, the Steelers, they probably have a plan in place where if Aaron Rodgers does X, Y, and Z, they might ask him to come back. But I also think they're fully prepared for if he doesn't want to come back or they don't want him to come back, they have their plan B ready to go. And Mason Rudolph's sign with the team for 2 years. And then also you'll still have Will Howard. And then you can still draft your guy. And then you can just see, hey, who's gonna be the guy moving forward there. So lots of different angles the Steelers can happen there. But I don't think that the chances of Aaron Rodgers doing that, I just think that there's a lot of boxes to check. So it's tough to say right now, but that's something we will monitor because if we get the sense that, like, let's say through week 10, the Steelers are 7-2, with their early bye week. They're 7-2 and they're looking really good. And Aaron Rodgers is feeling like, you know what, this could be something. And let's say they go and they have a good run. They don't make the Super Bowl or anything like that, but they look dangerous. Maybe Aaron Rodgers looks around and says, I want to do this again. I want to have a chance here. I think we got a shot here. I wouldn't put it past the Steelers to be open to making something like that work, while still keeping their eye on the ball as far as picking future quarterbacks. So I think that all those things are possible to get done. Even if Aaron Rodgers does stick around for an extra year, though I still think it's not all that likely he will, but we will see as time moves on.